So indifference schedule when shown on the graph, we can take the graph like this, x, y. Suppose we are taking apples here, mangoes here, and when we are putting the data, we will get the curve like this. This is downward sloping curve, and this is known as IC. IC means indifference curve, and the combination, various combination A, B and C. This is y1, y2, y3, x1, x2 and x3. So when the consumer is buying y3 of mangoes, he would be able to buy x1 of apple. Second combination is when the consumer is buying y2 of mango, is buying x2 of apple. And third combination is consumer is buying y1 of mango and x3 of apple. So, and consumer is equally happy with all the combinations shown on the shown at the point A, B and C, because they all are on the same curve. So this is the explanation of the consumer's preference, and this explanation when shown on the graph is known as indifference curve. Another term is marginal rate of substitution. Now the slope at any point on the indifference curve is known as marginal rate of substitution. Slope at A, B, C or any point on this curve is known as marginal rate of substitution. It is the rate at which consumer is willing to substitute one good for another. With what amount the consumer is ready to sacrifice one product to get more of another product. We have seen the example of two fruits, mangoes and apples. So when the consumer want to have more of mangoes, he will have to sacrifice some amount of apples, so that the rate with which one product is being substituted by another product, that is known as marginal rate of substitution. It is the amount, we can say it is the amount of one good that a consumers require as compensation to give up one unit of another good. Marginal rate of substitution, we can show it on the graph like this is downward sloping. So this is you can see here, this is 5:1 we can say, and here it would be 1:1. So mangoes and apples. So rate here, MRS marginal rate of substitution is 1:1 and here it is 5:1. So this graph is explaining the marginal rate of substitution, and we can notice that it is diminishing. That means initially it is 5:1, then it becomes 1:1. From 5 it would be 4, from 4 it would be 3, then 2, then 1. So this is known as principle of diminishing marginal rate of substitution. As more and more of a good, say X, is substituted for another good, say Y, the marginal rate of substitution diminishes. This is due to the fact that the consumer, when want to have more of a particular product, he is ready to sacrifice less of it. Because this is due to the fact that as consumer has more and more of good X, he goes on losing interest therein, and he is prepared to give less and less of other product Y for it. So consumers having more of a product, he will be more satisfied or he will lose his interest in that product, so he will be ready to give up those products. Now properties of indifference curve, there are 4 properties. One is higher indifference curve are preferred to lower one, because the combination the consumer is properties of indifference curve. The first property of indifference curve is higher indifference curves are preferred than the lower one. Why consumer? Suppose this is indifference curve. Three indifference curves there, A, B and C. Consumer would like to be on C. This is the higher indifference curve and it will be preferred by the consumer in comparison to the lower ones. Why? Because consumers usually prefer more of something than less of it. When consumer is at here, he is having more of X and Y. But when he is here, he will have less of X and Y. When he is here, he will have lesser than X and Y. So higher indifference curve is always preferred by the consumer than the lower one. This is the first property of indifference curve. Higher indifference curve represent more of product of X and Y, that's why it is always preferred. The second combination is the consumer will always, the shape of the indifference curve is always downward sloping. The indifference curve can't be like this, or it can't be like this, or it can't be straight line. It is always downward sloping. It is based on the fact that a consumer is willing to give up one good only if or she gets more of a second product. That's why it is always downward sloping. If we are telling that it is upward sloping, that means consumer is having more. When consumer is going for the second combination, he is having more of X. Suppose he was buying X and Y, now he is buying X1 and Y1, which is not possible with his limited money income. Stagnant means, straight line means, horizontal means the consumer is buying more of X, but Y is constant, Y is not changing. Straight line horizontal means consumer is buying more of Y, but X is not changing, which is not possible. If consumer is buying more of a particular product, he will have to decrease the amount of the second product. That's why the second quality or the second feature of indifference curve is indifference curves are always downward sloping. A consumer is willing to give up one good only if or she gets more of the other good in order to remain equally happy. If the quantity of one good is reduced, the quantity of other good must be increased. For this reason, indifference curve is most of the time it is downward sloping. The third property says that indifference curve do not cross each other. It will never intersect each other. Third property says that indifference curve never intersect each other. Suppose there are two indifference curve A and B. It can't intersect each other, or there cannot be a point C on the graph. Why? Because when we are telling that higher indifference curve gives more satisfaction to the consumer, that means it has to be, the consumer can't be on C at the same time he is having more satisfaction. So if C is on B, that means he is having less satisfaction. It is because it is lower indifference curve. So it is not possible to be on the higher indifference curve and lower indifference curve at the same time. And C point is denoting, C point is telling us that the consumer is present at the high indifference curve as well as on the lower indifference curve, that too at the same time. It's not possible. So the third property is indifference curve do not cross. Fourth property is indifference curve is always convex to the horizon. Convex to the horizon means it is always like this. This is indifference curve. It would not be like this. It can't be concave to the horizon. It will be always convex. This is horizon. It is always convex to the horizon. And this is for the reason that it is the law of diminishing marginal rate of substitution. If it is increasing rate of substitution, then it would be it can be concave to the horizon. So the fourth property is indifference curve is always convex to the horizon. So the four features or attributes or the characteristics of indifference curve is: first, higher indifference curve is always preferred to the lower indifference curve. Second property, it is always downward sloping like this. And the third property is it do not cross each other, it will never intersect each other. And the fourth property is it is always convex to the horizon. It can't be concave or it can't be straight line in normal condition.